The real estate agent refused to enter the property alone, and when Marcus finally understood why, he realized he'd just purchased either his greatest fortune or his final resting place. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. Marcus Chin stood in the parking lot of Henderson and Associates Real Estate, keys trembling in his hand, staring at the woman who'd just sold him what she called the opportunity of a lifetime. Sarah Henderson wouldn't meet his eyes. That should have been his first warning. Instead, he'd been too focused on the impossibly low price. 12 acres of prime Connecticut real estate, a 15,000 square foot mansion, original fixtures from 1,924, and a price tag that made absolutely no sense, $340,000. In an area where vacant lots sold for twice that amount, the previous owner was motivated, Sarah had explained during the closing, her voice unnaturally high. Very motivated. Marcus was 34. A software engineer who'd made a small fortune when his startup got acquired by a tech giant. He'd spent the last year searching for the perfect property to renovate, something with history and character that he could restore to glory while documenting the process for his growing YouTube channel. The Whitmore estate seemed like destiny calling. The mansion had been built by industrialist Theodore Whitmore in 1924. A Gothic revival masterpiece complete with turrets, gargoyles, and stained glass windows that cast rainbow shadows across marble floors. The property had passed through 7 owners in the last 30 years. Each stayed less than 2 years. The last owner, an investment group from New York, had owned it for exactly 14 months before listing it at a fraction of its value, citing unforeseen complications. Marcus had toured the property once, briefly, with Sarah practically sprinting through the rooms. She'd refused to go into the basement, claiming a bad knee and steep stairs. The main floor was spectacular despite decades of neglect. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls, their prisms clouded with dust. Original hardwood floors stretched beneath layers of grime. The grand staircase curved upward like a petrified river, its banister carved with intricate vines and flowers. Every surface whispered of former grandeur waiting to be awakened. He'd seen the potential immediately. His subscribers would love this. The transformation from abandoned Gothic mansion to modern masterpiece would generate millions of views. He'd already planned the video series, Resurrecting the Whitmore Estate, 26 episodes documenting every phase of renovation. Sponsorship deals were already in discussion. Everything was falling into place, except Sarah's hands had shaken when passing him the keys. Except the previous owners had left furniture, clothing, and personal items as if they'd fled in the middle of the night. Except 3 local contractors had refused to bid on the job after visiting the property, offering no explanation beyond uncomfortable silence and sudden remembering of prior commitments. Now, standing in the afternoon sun, with those keys burning against his palm, Marcus felt the first whisper of doubt. Sarah lingered by her Mercedes, clearly waiting for him to leave first. "You have my number if you need anything," she called, already sliding into the driver's seat. Anything at all. She was gone before he could respond, her car accelerating faster than necessary down the tree-lined drive. Marcus turned to face his new property. The Whitmore estate sprawled before him, 3 stories of stone and shadow climbing toward a slate roof that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Ivy strangled the eastern wall, its leaves an unhealthy rust color despite the season. The windows stared back at him, dark and empty, like eyes that had witnessed too much and learned to keep secrets. He'd arranged to have utilities turned on that morning. Electricity, water, gas, everything should be functional. The plan was to spend the afternoon doing a thorough inspection, taking measurements, and filming his first episode, The Grand Entrance. His camera equipment waited in his truck, professional video camera, lighting kit, audio recorder, and his lucky Steadicam that had been with him since his channel's beginning. The October air carried an unseasonable chill as he gathered his equipment. Leaves that should have been vibrant autumn colors looked muted and sick on their branches. The grounds, which should have been beautiful even in neglect, felt oppressive. 12 acres of overgrown gardens, a dried fountain at the center of a circular drive, and beyond, forests pressing close like spectators at an execution. Marcus shook off the melodramatic thought. He was letting Sarah's nervousness infect him. Old houses felt eerie until you brought them back to life. That's what he did. That's what made his channel successful. He breathed history into abandoned spaces, showed his audience that what others saw as haunted or cursed was simply neglected and misunderstood. The front door was massive, 12 feet of carved oak depicting a hunting scene, dogs chasing a stag through stylized forest. The detail was extraordinary, each leaf and animal rendered with obsessive precision. Theodore Whitmore had spared no expense. Marcus ran his fingers over the carving, feeling the smooth grain worn by a century of hands. He fit the key into the lock. It turned with surprising ease, as if the mechanism had been recently oiled. The door swung inward on silent hinges, revealing the grand foyer. Even in neglect, the space was breathtaking. A chandelier the size of a compact car hung from a ceiling painted with celestial scenes. Constellations, planets, and mythological figures dancing across a midnight blue sky. The marble floor was a checkerboard of black and white, though decades of dirt obscured its gleam. The staircase commanded attention, splitting at a landing to curve left and right to the second floor. Marcus stepped inside, his footsteps echoing in the emptiness. The air was stale but not unpleasant, carrying hints of old wood and something floral he couldn't identify. Dust danced in shafts of sunlight penetrating grimy windows. He set down his equipment and pulled out his camera, framing the first shot. "Welcome to the Whitmore Estate," he began, his voice echoing slightly. Built in 1924 by Theodore Whitmore, this 15,000-square-foot mansion has been abandoned for the better part of 3 decades. Today marks the beginning of its resurrection. He panned slowly across the foyer, capturing the chandelier, the staircase, and the portrait gallery visible through an archway. The portrait stopped him. He lowered the camera, drawn toward the gallery. Dozens of paintings lined the walls, all depicting the same family through different generations. The oldest showed Theodore Whitmore himself, stern, mustachioed, with eyes that followed movement. Beside him, his wife Catherine, beautiful in the severe way of another era. Their children, 5 of them, ranging from infant to adolescent. Later portraits showed the family aging, the children growing, eventually having children of their own. But there was something wrong with the paintings. Marcus couldn't identify it at first, just a subtle wrongness that made his skin prickle. Then he understood. In every portrait, regardless of age or setting, the subject's eyes held the same expression, a kind of desperate warning. Even the children, even Theodore himself in his most formal poses, seemed to be silently screaming at whoever viewed them. Marcus shook his head. He was projecting, reading too much into artistic choices made a century ago. Portrait styles of that era often looked severe to modern eyes. He returned to the foyer and his equipment, forcing focus on practical matters. The inspection tour proceeded methodically. He moved through the first floor, cataloging each room: formal dining room with table for 20 still set with china, drawing room with furniture draped in sheets, music room housing a grand piano that had somehow retained its tuning, and a library whose floor-to-ceiling shelves still held thousands of volumes. Everything was intact, too intact. Most abandoned properties suffered vandalism or scavenging. Squatters claimed them, weather damaged them, but the Whitmore estate remained pristine in its decay, as if time itself was reluctant to fully commit to destruction. The kitchen surprised him most. Original 1,920 fixtures existed alongside renovations from multiple eras. A 1,950 refrigerator, 1,980 microwave, contemporary coffee maker still plugged into the wall. A calendar hung beside the pantry door, open to March 2019. Someone had marked the 14th with a red X and written a single word: leave. Marcus photographed everything, narrating observations for his audience. The video was going well. This place was incredible. Every room offered something unexpected, some detail that would captivate viewers. His subscriber count would explode. He saved the basement for last, remembering Sarah's reluctance. The door was located off the kitchen, a thick oak barrier with an old-fashioned crossbar lock. He lifted the bar, which moved smoothly despite its apparent age, and pulled open the door. Stairs descended into darkness. The light switch beside the door clicked uselessly. Either the basement bulb was burned out or the electrical service didn't extend below ground. Marcus retrieved a heavy-duty flashlight from his equipment bag. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing stone steps worn smooth by countless feet. The air rising from below was noticeably colder, carrying a mineral scent like underground streams. He descended carefully, one hand on the wall for balance, flashlight sweeping ahead. The basement was vast. His light couldn't reach the far walls, suggesting a space that extended beyond the mansion's footprint. The floor was packed earth rather than concrete, and the ceiling was a network of massive wooden beams darkened by age. Storage shelves lined the walls, holding an archaeological collection of household items, preserving jars from multiple eras, tools, furniture, trunks, and boxes labeled in fading ink. Marcus moved deeper, documenting everything. This was incredible content. The basement alone could be an entire episode. He was so focused on filming that he almost missed the door. It was set into the far wall, so old and weathered it nearly blended with the stone around it. Not a modern door, but something medieval. Thick planks bound with iron straps and studded with large rivets. A modern padlock secured it, incongruous against the ancient wood. The lock was substantial, designed to keep something very valuable secured or something very dangerous contained. Marcus approached slowly, his light revealing details. The wood around the lock showed scratches, as if someone had tried to pry it open. Fresh scratches? He realized with surprise. The exposed wood was lighter, suggesting recent attempts. He tried the lock experimentally, secured tight. He was about to turn away when he noticed the sound, or rather, the absence of it. The basement had been filled with subtle noises, the house settling, wind pushing against foundations, water moving through old pipes. But near this door, silence was absolute. Not peaceful quiet, but aggressive nothingness, as if sound itself was being swallowed. Marcus pressed his ear against the wood. Nothing. No echo of empty space beyond. No sense of what lay past this barrier. Just that consuming silence. He pulled back, suddenly uncomfortable. The basement felt different now. The darkness seemed thicker. His flashlight beam, which had cut clearly before, now seemed to barely push back the shadows. He decided to head back upstairs. Enough exploring for today. He'd need proper lighting equipment to film down here effectively, and maybe some answers about that locked door. Perhaps the property survey would show what lay beyond. Or maybe Sarah would know. As he climbed the stairs, Marcus felt an overwhelming urge to look back. He resisted, maintaining his pace, refusing to acknowledge the irrational feeling that something was watching from that corner of darkness. The door at the top seemed impossibly far away, though he knew it was only 15 steps. 14, 13. His count provided focus, anchoring him against rising anxiety that had no logical source. He emerged into the kitchen, shutting the basement door firmly and dropping the crossbar into place. The action felt necessary, protective. He stood for a moment, breathing harder than the brief climb justified, feeling foolish but unable to shake the tension coiled in his chest. The kitchen window showed late afternoon sun. He'd been in the basement maybe 20 minutes, yet it felt like hours had passed. Marcus checked his watch, confirming time hadn't actually dilated, just his imagination, working overtime in an unfamiliar space. He gathered his equipment, deciding to call it a day. He had plenty of footage for his first episode. The rest could wait until tomorrow when he'd have full daylight and maybe some contractor company. He'd contacted Michael Torres, an old friend from college who'd become a general contractor. Michael had agreed to evaluate the property and provide renovation estimates. They'd scheduled to meet tomorrow morning at 9. Marcus secured the front door behind him, testing it twice to ensure it was locked. His truck waited in the circular drive, familiar and reassuring after the mansion's strangeness. As he loaded his equipment, he glanced back at the house. Third-floor windows caught the dying light, reflecting it in a way that momentarily looked like faces pressed against glass. He blinked. Empty windows, just tricks of light and shadow. He needed sleep. The excitement of closing on the property, combined with the day's exploration, had exhausted him more than he'd realized. The drive to his apartment in the neighboring town took 30 minutes through winding country roads. Marcus had kept his rental specifically because he knew renovation would take months, possibly over a year. He'd stay at the apartment while making the mansion habitable, then move in for the final phases of restoration. His phone rang as he pulled into his apartment complex. The caller ID showed Michael Torres. "Hey Michael, still on for tomorrow?" Marcus answered. "That's why I'm calling." Michael's voice carried an odd tension. "I talked to some guys who've worked in that area about the Whitmore estate. Marcus, I don't think I can take this job." "What? Why?" "I haven't even told you the scope yet." "It's not about the scope, it's the property, the house." Michael paused. "Look, I know you're going to think this is crazy, but every contractor in the county refuses to work there. There are stories." "Stories? Come on, Michael. You're a rational guy. You believe in ghost stories now? I believe in self-preservation. 3 different construction crews have walked off that job over the years. One guy, Tony Delgado, he was a framer, tough as they come. He told me he wouldn't go back there for 10 times his usual rate. Said the house doesn't want to be fixed." Marcus laughed, but it sounded forced even to his own ears. Houses don't want anything. They're inanimate objects. Wood, stone, and nails. "Maybe, but I'm not taking the job." "I'm sorry, Marcus. I really am. But I've got a family to think about." Michael hesitated before adding, "You should sell it, take the loss and walk away. That place has a history. Every old house has a history. That's what makes them interesting. Not like this one, the Whitmore family. Marcus, do you know what happened to them? Theodore died in 1952. The family sold the property. That's all the historical records show. That's because the historical records were scrubbed. Theodore didn't die peacefully in his sleep. Neither did his wife. Neither did their children or grandchildren. 7 people, Marcus, found dead in that house on the same morning. No marks, no signs of struggle, no apparent cause. Just dead. All of them. The information landed like a physical blow. Marcus had researched the property extensively, read every archived newspaper article, studied every deed transfer. Nothing had mentioned this. That would have been major news. There's no way that gets hidden. Money hides a lot. The Whitmore family was connected, very connected. The official cause of death was listed as gas leak for the adults, natural causes for the children. But the coroner who signed those death certificates, he retired immediately afterward, moved across the country, never practiced medicine again. Where are you getting this information? My grandfather grew up in that town. He was a kid when it happened, but everyone knew. They just didn't talk about it. Small communities, Marcus, they have long memories and deep secrets. That house has been poison ever since. Every owner experiences something. Every single one leaves. Marcus felt his excitement from earlier curdling into something else. What kind of something? Depends who you ask. Sounds. Visions. Equipment malfunctions. Animals refusing to enter. Workers getting injured in ways that shouldn't be possible. Nothing you can point to and say definitively this is wrong, but enough wrong things that patterns emerge. That house doesn't want people there, Marcus, and it has ways of making them leave. This is insane. You're talking about a structure having intention, desire, malevolence. That's not rational. No, it's not. But neither is 7 people dying simultaneously for no apparent reason. Neither is every subsequent owner fleeing within 2 years. Neither is an estate worth $3 million selling for barely. $300,000. Connect those dots however you want, but I'm staying away. I'd really appreciate it if you did too. Michael disconnected before Marcus could respond. He sat in his truck, phone still pressed to his ear, watching darkness settle over the parking lot. The conversation had shaken him more than he wanted to admit, not because he believed in haunted houses or cursed properties, but because Michael did. Solid, practical, skeptical Michael genuinely feared the Whitmore estate. Marcus climbed out of his truck and headed to his apartment, mind churning. He needed facts, not folklore. 7 deaths would have generated records beyond what money could scrub. He needed to dig deeper, find the truth beneath the rumors. Inside his apartment, he fired up his laptop and began searching. Not just historical society websites and official records, but deeper archives, university databases, genealogy sites, newspaper archives from surrounding towns. If the local paper had been pressured to silence, maybe neighboring publications had covered the story. 3 hours later, he found it. A single article from a Hartford newspaper dated the 7th of November, 1952. The headline read, "Mysterious Deaths at Whitmore Estate Under Investigation." The article was brief, factual, and carefully worded. 7 members of the Whitmore family had been found deceased at their Connecticut estate. Authorities were investigating. Foul play was not suspected. The family had no known enemies and lived quietly. A follow-up article 2 weeks later reported the investigation concluded. Gas leak determined as cause. Tragedy termed as accident. Estate to be managed by distant relatives. No further details provided. But there were details in what wasn't said. No quotes from investigators. No description of where bodies were found or who discovered them. No mention of funeral arrangements or family statements. The articles read like carefully sanitized versions of events, designed to inform without really revealing anything. Marcus expanded his search, looking for the family members individually. Theodore Whitmore, age 76. Catherine Whitmore, age 74. Their son James, age 52. James's wife Margaret, age 48. Their 3 children, Theodore Jr., age 24. Elizabeth, age 19. Michael, age 16. 7 people spanning 3 generations, all dead on the same morning. He found their graves in the town cemetery. They were buried together in the family plot. The dates confirmed the newspaper reports. All died the 5th of November, 1952. But the epitaph on Theodore's headstone caught his attention. Instead of the typical beloved husband and father, it read simply, "He finished his work." What work? What had Theodore been doing? Marcus searched for information about Theodore's career. The industrialist had made his fortune in manufacturing, specifically precision instruments and mechanical devices. Patents filed in his name showed an obsessive mind, someone who approached problems with mathematical precision and mechanical innovation. He'd held over 40 patents, ranging from improved gear systems to specialized measuring devices. But Theodore's later patents took a different direction. Instead of practical industrial applications, they became increasingly esoteric. Devices for measuring environmental fluctuations, instruments for detecting subtle energetic variations, and one particularly strange patent filed in 1948 for a subterranean acoustic resonance chamber. Marcus stopped scrolling. Acoustic resonance chamber. He thought about the locked door in the basement, the consuming silence around it, the sense of vast space beyond. Had Theodore built something beneath his mansion? Something that required securing behind medieval-looking doors and modern padlocks? He needed to get back into that basement. Tomorrow, in full daylight, with proper equipment, he'd document whatever lay beyond that door. For his channel initially, but now also for himself. He needed to understand what he'd bought. Sleep came reluctantly that night, filled with dreams of dark basements and locked doors, of portraits whose eyes tracked his movements, of silence so complete it became its own sound, a pressure against his eardrums like descending too quickly underwater. He woke repeatedly, checking his phone, counting down hours until sunrise. At 7 a.m., Marcus gave up on sleep. He showered, dressed, and loaded his truck with everything he might need: bolt cutters for the padlock, additional lighting, his camera equipment, and a crowbar just in case. He also packed his laptop, thinking he might need to reference Theodore's patents if he found the acoustic chamber. The drive to Whitmore Estate seemed shorter in morning light. Trees that had looked menacing yesterday now appeared merely overgrown. The mansion, while still imposing, lost some of its Gothic menace under the sun's direct gaze. Marcus felt his confidence returning. This was just a house, an extraordinary house with fascinating history, but just a structure nonetheless. He parked in the circular drive and gathered his equipment. The front door opened easily with his key. The foyer, which had seemed cavernous and oppressive yesterday, looked almost welcoming in morning light streaming through windows. Dust motes floated peacefully. The chandelier glittered with potential. This was the space he'd envisioned restoring. Marcus moved directly to the kitchen and the basement door. No hesitation this time. He was here for answers. He lifted the crossbar and descended with purpose, his powerful flashlight and headlamp pushing back darkness. The basement revealed itself exactly as yesterday: vast, packed earth floor, storage shelves, and, at the far end, that ancient door with its modern padlock. He approached the door, setting down his equipment and retrieving the bolt cutters. The padlock was substantial, but his tool was designed for this. He positioned the cutting jaws around the lock's shackle and squeezed with steady pressure. Metal groaned. The shackle held for a moment, then separated with a sharp crack that echoed through the basement. Marcus removed the severed lock and paused, last chance to reconsider. Whatever lay beyond this door, he was choosing to confront it, but he'd come too far, invested too much, to turn back now. He gripped the iron ring that served as a handle and pulled. The door moved with surprising ease, swinging outward on hinges that, like the front door, seemed recently maintained. Beyond, his lights revealed not another room, but a descending passage. Stone steps led down into darkness that his powerful flashlight barely penetrated. The passage was narrow, carved through bedrock, its walls showing tool marks from when it was excavated. This was it, Theodore's acoustic resonance chamber. It had to be. Marcus activated his camera, mounting it on his chest harness for hands-free recording. I'm entering what appears to be a subterranean passage beneath the Whitmore estate. He narrated, his voice sounding small in the vastness. According to patent records, Theodore Whitmore constructed an acoustic resonance chamber beneath his home in the late 1940s. I believe this passage leads to that chamber. He began his descent, counting steps as he went. 20, 30, 40. The passage continued far deeper than seemed reasonable. At 60 steps, the walls changed. The rough stone gave way to smooth concrete, and the passage widened into a landing. Before him stood another door, this one modern, heavy steel with a wheel-lock mechanism like a bank vault. The wheel turned smoothly when Marcus gripped it. Whoever had been here last had left it unlocked. The door swung inward on balanced hinges, revealing space beyond that made Marcus's breath catch. What happens next will turn this night upside down, reveal a truth nobody expected, and remind us why sometimes the greatest treasures hide in the darkest places. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. The chamber was enormous. His lights couldn't reach the far walls. The ceiling vaulted overhead, curving in a perfect dome at least 40 feet above the floor. But it wasn't the size that stopped him. It was the cars. Dozens of vehicles filled the space, arranged in careful rows like soldiers at attention. Classic cars, vintage automobiles, racing legends. His lights swept across chrome and paint, revealing shapes that sent his heart racing. He recognized models that shouldn't exist outside of museums and private collections worth millions. A 1937 Bugatti Type 57 SC Atlantic. Only 4 were ever made. One had sold at auction for $40 million. He stepped closer, his light confirming what his mind struggled to accept. This was real, not a replica. The car sat on its original wheels, its distinctive flowing lines unmistakable even under decades of dust. Beside it, a 1962 Ferrari 250 GTO, the most valuable car in the world. The last one sold had fetched over $70 million. Marcus's hands trembled as he moved between the rows, his light revealing treasure after treasure. A Mercedes-Benz 540K Special Roadster, a Talbot Lago T150C SS, a Delahaye 165 Cabriolet. Cars that belonged in museums, cars that collectors spent lifetimes searching for, cars worth millions each. How many were there? He tried counting, lost track, started over. At least 40 vehicles. Maybe 50? An underground collection that represented not just enormous wealth, but automotive history itself. He felt dizzy, overwhelmed by the impossibility of what he discovered. Theodore Whitmore had built this. But why? How had he acquired these vehicles? Why hide them underground? And why had 7 subsequent owners never found this chamber? Marcus moved deeper into the collection, documenting everything on camera, though his narration had devolved into breathless gasps and muttered disbelief. His light caught something at the chamber's center, a raised platform holding a single vehicle covered by a tarp. Unlike the others, which were dusty but visible, this one had been deliberately concealed. He approached slowly, suddenly aware of the profound silence. That consuming quiet he'd felt yesterday near the door. Down here, it was absolute. No sound penetrated from above. No ambient noise disturbed the stillness, just his breathing and footsteps echoing in the vastness. Marcus reached for the tarp's edge and pulled. The fabric slid away, revealing the car beneath. His breath stopped entirely. A Bugatti Royale Type 41, only 6 were ever built, worth conservatively over $100 million. This was the 7th, a prototype that had been lost to history. The car every collector believed destroyed in the war, and it sat before him, perfect and real, in a hidden chamber beneath an estate he'd bought for pocket change. He stood transfixed, trying to calculate what he was seeing. The Bugatti alone was worth more than he could process. Add the Ferrari, the other Bugattis, the Mercedes, the Delahaye, 40 to 50 of the world's most valuable automobiles. Conservative estimates put the collection's worth north of $300 million, maybe closer to $400 million, all sitting in darkness beneath a house nobody wanted. How was this possible? Marcus noticed something else. A desk stood against one wall, covered in papers and journals. He approached, his light revealing Theodore Whitmore's workspace. This wasn't just a storage chamber. It was a workshop, a sanctuary, the place where Theodore had spent his final years. The journals were dated, spanning from 1947 to November 1952. The final entry was dated November 4th, one day before the family's death. Marcus opened the last journal, his light revealing Theodore's distinctive handwriting. "The collection is complete," Theodore had written. 47 vehicles representing the pinnacle of automotive achievement, each one a testament to human genius and craftsmanship. "I've preserved them here, where they'll remain perfect and undiscovered, waiting for someone worthy to find them." The chamber's acoustic properties create perfect preservation conditions. No humidity, no temperature fluctuation, no decay. Time stops here, as it must. The entry continued. "Tomorrow I seal the chamber. The mechanism is simple but irreversible. Once initiated, the entrance will be hidden permanently. Whoever finds this place must be meant to. The house will test them. It will push them away like it pushed away everyone before. Only someone who can withstand the pressure deserves this treasure." Marcus's hand shook as he read, "The house will test them." What did that mean? He thought about Sarah's fear, Michael's refusal, the contractors who'd walked away, the owners who'd fled. Was Theodore's acoustic chamber more than just a preservation space? Had he built something that affected the house above? He flipped to earlier entries, searching for explanations. The pages revealed Theodore's gradual descent into obsession. The industrialist had started collecting cars in the 1922, purchasing rare vehicles as investments and artistic appreciation. But over time, the collection became something more, a mission, a purpose that consumed him entirely. "I understand now what I'm meant to do," one entry from 1948 read. "These machines represent the height of human achievement before the world lost its way, before mass production cheapened everything, before efficiency replaced beauty. I will preserve them, not in a museum where they'll be gawked at by crowds who don't understand their significance, but here, in perfect solitude, waiting for someone who truly appreciates what they represent." Further back, "The chamber is nearly complete. The acoustic properties exceed my calculations. Sound behaves differently here. Vibrations resonate in unexpected ways. I've discovered frequencies that affect consciousness itself. Standing in this space for extended periods produces unusual mental states, clarity beyond normal thought. Or perhaps clarity is the wrong word, more like seeing through the illusions we accept as reality." Marcus felt a chill. Theodore hadn't just built a storage chamber. He'd created something else, something that affected people. Was that why the house felt wrong? Were the chamber's properties somehow radiating upward, creating the oppressive atmosphere that drove everyone away? He needed to leave, process this, figure out his next steps, but his feet wouldn't move. He stood among hundreds of millions of dollars in automotive history, in a chamber that apparently altered consciousness, beneath a house where 7 people had died mysteriously. And suddenly, nothing about this situation felt like fortune. It felt like a trap closing around him. His camera was still recording. His subscribers would see this eventually. But first, he needed to understand what he'd really discovered. Not just valuable cars, but Theodore Whitmore's final legacy. A collection worth a fortune, and a chamber with properties that defied explanation. The question wasn't just what he'd found, it was what would happen next. Marcus forced himself to move, stepping away from the journals and back toward the rows of vehicles. He needed photographs, documentation, proof of what lay hidden here for 7 decades. He began systematically filming each car, narrating details when he could focus enough to speak coherently. The collection represented automotive history's greatest hits. Beyond the headline cars, he found a 1,936 Mercedes-Benz 500K Roadster, a 1,938 Alfa Romeo 8C 2900B, a 1,931 Duesenberg Model J, and cars he couldn't immediately identify that would require research. Some wore dust like shrouds. Others appeared recently maintained, their chrome gleaming, their leather interiors supple. Had someone been caring for them, the previous owners? Or had Theodore's preservation chamber kept them frozen in time? As Marcus worked his way through the collection, he noticed details he'd missed initially. Small placards stood beside each vehicle, bearing neat handwritten descriptions. Theodore's work. Each placard detailed the car's provenance, technical specifications, and why Theodore had chosen to include it in his collection. The man had been meticulous, documenting everything like a museum curator. But the final placard, beside the Bugatti Royale, carried a different message. Instead of technical details, it bore a warning. The guardian of this collection accepts responsibility for its preservation and protection. To claim ownership is to accept obligation. These machines must never be dispersed. They exist together or not at all. This is my final wish. This is your burden if you choose to remain. Marcus read the message 3 times, its implications settling over him like a weighted blanket. Theodore hadn't just hidden valuable cars. He'd created a test. The house pushed people away. Those who fled never discovered the collection. But someone who could withstand the pressure, who refused to leave despite the house's influence, would eventually find this chamber. And by finding it, they'd become its guardian, bound by Theodore's final wish to preserve the collection intact. That's why previous owners had fled. They'd felt the house's wrongness and left before discovering the fortune beneath. But Marcus had pushed through. He'd ignored warnings and explored thoroughly. Now he knew the secret. And with that knowledge came responsibility. Or did it? Theodore had no legal claim beyond the grave. These cars belonged to Marcus now, part of the property he'd purchased. He could sell them individually and retire at 34 with more money than he'd ever spend. Or he could honor Theodore's wishes and find some way to preserve the collection as intended. The choice should have been obvious. But standing in that silent chamber, surrounded by machines worth hundreds of millions, with Theodore's journals documenting decades of obsession, Marcus felt the weight of expectation. This wasn't just about money. It was about understanding why someone would dedicate their life to this collection, then seal it away for someone unknown to discover decades later. He needed time to think, to plan, to understand what he'd really inherited. Marcus gathered his camera equipment and began the journey back to the surface, leaving the chamber's steel door open behind him. The passage felt longer climbing than descending. Each step carried him back toward normal reality, away from the impossible discovery below. In the basement proper, he paused at the ancient wooden door. Should he lock it again? Keep the chamber secret a while longer? But there was no point. He'd already breached Theodore's final seal. The collection was discovered. The test, if that's what it had been, was complete. He left the door open and climbed to the kitchen. Daylight through the windows felt harsh after the chamber's artificial illumination. Marcus checked his phone. Nearly 3 hours had passed since he'd descended. It had felt both longer and shorter, time moving strangely in that subterranean space. He had a dozen missed calls, mostly from Michael Torres. One voicemail. "Marcus, it's Michael again. Look, I've been thinking about our conversation. I feel bad about refusing the job. If you still want help, I'll come by. Just to look. No commitment, but I shouldn't have let superstition dictate business decisions. Call me back." Marcus smiled despite his exhaustion. Michael's change of heart was probably influenced by guilt rather than bravery, but either way, his friend would be coming. And Marcus desperately wanted another perspective on what he'd found. He called back. Michael? Yeah, I still want your help. Can you come by this afternoon? There's something I need to show you, something that's going to blow your mind. Michael Torres arrived at the Whitmore estate exactly 3 hours later, his white contractor's truck kicking up dust as it rolled down the long driveway. Marcus waited on the front steps, having spent the intervening time pacing the foyer and trying to process what he'd discovered. The weight of the secret felt physical, pressing against his chest, making normal breathing difficult. "Okay, I'm here," Michael announced, climbing out of his truck. He was a broad-shouldered man in his mid-30s, with the weathered hands of someone who'd spent 2 decades working with tools. "But I'm telling you right now, if anything weird happens, I'm gone. No explanations, no apologies, just gone." "Fair enough," Marcus agreed. "But I promise what I'm about to show you has nothing to do with ghosts or curses. It's real, physical, and completely impossible." Michael raised an eyebrow. "That's not as reassuring as you think it is." They entered the mansion together. Michael's tension was visible in his rigid posture, his darting eyes that took in every shadow and corner. But as they moved through the first floor toward the kitchen, some of that anxiety eased. In daylight, with another person present, the Whitmore estate lost much of its oppressive atmosphere. It was just an old house in need of restoration. "So what's this big discovery?" Michael asked as they reached the kitchen. "Found original fixtures worth something? Hidden wall safe with cash?" "Bigger," Marcus replied, leading him to the basement door. "Much bigger." Michael's expression darkened when he saw the open door and descending stairs. "The basement? Marcus, I told you about. I know what you told me. Just trust me for 10 more minutes. If you want to leave after that, I'll completely understand." They descended together, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Michael's breathing quickened as they reached the basement floor, but he followed gamely as Marcus led him toward the far wall where the ancient door stood open. "What is this?" Michael murmured, running his hand along the medieval planking. "This door wasn't here when the house was built. Someone added it later." "Theodore Whitmore?" Marcus confirmed. "In the late 1942. He built something down here, something incredible." He gestured toward the passage beyond. "Come on." The descent through the carved passage tested Michael's nerve. Marcus could hear his friends' muttered prayers in Spanish, words Marcus remembered from their college days when Michael faced particularly difficult exams. But Michael didn't retreat. Step by step, they descended until reaching the steel door of the chamber. "That's a vault door," Michael observed, his contractor's eye assessing the mechanism. Custom built, probably cost a fortune even back then. What was he protecting? Marcus swung the door open without answering. His flashlight swept across the chamber, and Michael's sharp intake of breath echoed in the vastness. "Holy Mary, Mother of God," Michael whispered. He stepped into the chamber, his own flashlight joining Marcus's to illuminate row after row of vintage automobiles. "Is this real? Tell me this is real." "It's real," Marcus confirmed, watching his friend move between the cars with an expression of absolute wonder. 47 vehicles, collected by Theodore Whitmore over 3 decades and hidden down here since 1952. Michael approached the nearest car, a gleaming Talbot Lago, but didn't touch it. "I recognize some of these from magazines, car shows, but they're supposed to be in museums, private collections. How did they end up here?" "Theodore bought them. According to his journals, he spent his entire fortune acquiring what he considered the pinnacle of automotive achievement. Then he sealed them in this chamber, where they'd be perfectly preserved." "Sealed them?" Michael turned. "You mean no one's known about this for 70 years? Every owner since Theodore has fled before finding it. The house pushes people away before they can discover what's hidden beneath." Michael's expression clouded. "The house pushes people away. You hear how that sounds, right?" "I know how it sounds, but look around you. This collection is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe more. Why would 7 consecutive owners abandon a property without finding this? Why would contractors refuse to work here? Why does this place feel wrong to everyone who enters?" "Because it's old and creepy," Michael countered. But his voice lacked conviction. "Old houses feel weird. It's normal." Marcus led him to Theodore's desk and the journals. "Read the last entry. Theodore describes what he built here. Not just a storage chamber, but something else. An acoustic resonance chamber with properties that affect consciousness. Michael read silently, his frown deepening with each line. When he finished, he set the journal down carefully. So you're telling me this guy built some kind of psychological weapon that makes people uncomfortable enough to abandon a property worth millions? And you think that's less crazy than just accepting the place as creepy? I'm saying Theodore was a genius inventor with 40 patents to his name. His final project was this chamber. He documented its acoustic properties extensively. And for 70 years, this place has had the exact effect he predicted, pushing people away before they could discover the collection. Michael walked away from the desk, moving between the cars again. He stopped at the covered centerpiece, the Bugatti Royale. What's under here? The crown jewel. The reason Theodore considered his collection complete. Michael pulled the tarp away, revealing the Bugatti. His sharp intake of breath told Marcus his friend recognized it. That can't be. The 7th Royale was destroyed. Every car guy knows that story. Apparently not destroyed, hidden here by Theodore, who documented its provenance in his journals. Every car here has complete documentation, provenance, purchase records, technical specifications. Theodore was meticulous. They stood in silence, the enormity of the discovery settling over both of them. Finally, Michael spoke. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "Legally, this all belongs to me. It was part of the property sale, but Theodore left specific instructions. He wanted the collection preserved intact, never dispersed or sold off piece by piece. That's not legally binding. Dead people don't get to dictate terms." "I know, but there's something about his dedication, his life's work hidden down here for someone worthy to find. I can't just auction everything off and walk away." Michael turned to face him directly. "Marcus, you're talking about $400 million, maybe more. You could retire, travel the world, never work another day. Why would you honor the wishes of a dead man you never met?" "Because finding this made me responsible for it. Theodore designed a test. The house drives people away, most flee, but someone stubborn enough, someone who could withstand the pressure, would eventually find the chamber. That person was meant to be the guardian, and that person is me." "Or," Michael suggested, "you could take the money and be free of this weird house and its weird history." Marcus had no answer. He'd been wrestling with the same question since discovering the collection. The rational choice was obvious, but something about Theodore's final wish, his lifelong obsession carefully documented and preserved, demanded consideration. They spent the next hour exploring the collection together. Michael's contractor expertise revealed details Marcus had missed. Ventilation systems, keeping air circulating, dehumidifiers, maintaining perfect conditions, subtle lighting that came on automatically when the vault opened. Theodore hadn't just hidden cars, he'd built a preservation system that continued functioning decades after his death. "This must have cost millions to build," Michael observed. "The excavation alone would have been massive, and somehow he did it without anyone noticing. He was wealthy and respected. People didn't question what he did on his own property. Still, you can't dig a chamber this size in secret. Someone must have known." Marcus nodded. "The contractors who built it, they probably signed confidentiality agreements, and they're all dead now." As they prepared to leave the chamber, Michael paused at the steel door. "What about security? Now that you've found this place, how do you protect it? Word gets out about 400 million in cars, and you'll have thieves lining up." "That's another problem," Marcus acknowledged. "I can't exactly call the police and say, 'Hey, I found a fortune in stolen vehicles.' Some of these cars disappeared under suspicious circumstances. Questions will be asked. Were they stolen? Theodore's records say he purchased everything legally, but some of the sellers probably shouldn't have been selling. War era, things were chaotic. Ownership chains get murky. They sealed the chamber and made their way back to the surface. In the kitchen, with afternoon light streaming through windows, the morning's discovery felt surreal. Had they really been standing among $400 million in vintage automobiles? Or had they both succumbed to some shared delusion? "I need coffee," Michael announced. "Strong coffee and time to process this." They drove to town together, finding a small diner that served both their needs. Over coffee and pie, they discussed options. Michael, despite his initial reluctance, had become invested in solving the puzzle Marcus faced. "Here's what I see," Michael said, stirring his third sugar into his coffee. "You've got three choices. 1. Sell everything, take the money, live like a king. 2. Keep it secret, preserve the collection like Theodore wanted, and live in that creepy house as its guardian. 3. Go public, donate the cars to museums, get a tax write-off and recognition, but not much money. Those are my options? Unless you see a fourth I'm missing," Marcus considered. "What if there's a middle path? Keep the collection together, but not hidden. Turn the estate into a private museum, limited access, carefully curated. Preserve Theodore's legacy while sharing it with people who'd appreciate it." Michael leaned back, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "A private museum? That's not terrible. You'd need serious security. Climate control, insurance that costs more than most people make in a year. And you'd have to live there, manage it, dedicate your life to it basically, like Theodore did." "Yeah, but he was obsessed. Are you?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. Was he obsessed, or just overwhelmed by responsibility? He thought about his YouTube channel, his plans for renovation videos, his subscribers waiting for content. This discovery changed everything, not just his financial situation, but his entire trajectory. "I need to research the legal issues," he finally said. "Verify ownership of each vehicle, make sure I'm not harboring stolen property. Then I need to understand the chamber itself, what Theodore actually built down there." "You're really going to stay in that house?" Michael asked. "Even knowing what happened to the Whitmore family? They died from a gas leak. That's the official story. You read Theodore's journals. You know he was messing with acoustic frequencies and consciousness. What if the chamber isn't just affecting people upstairs? What if it's dangerous?" The possibility hadn't occurred to Marcus. He'd been so focused on the collection's value and Theodore's final wishes that he hadn't considered the chamber itself might pose a threat. Theodore lived with it for years. His entire family did. And they all died on the same morning. No marks, no apparent cause. Marcus, what if the chamber had something to do with it? The theory sent chills down Marcus's spine. Could Theodore's obsession with acoustic properties have created something lethal? The journals described unusual mental states, clarity beyond normal thought. What if that clarity came with a cost? "I need to research acoustic resonance," Marcus decided. "Understand what Theodore built before I spend more time down there." They parted ways with Michael, promising to help with any construction work Marcus needed, supernatural concerns notwithstanding. "Just call during daylight hours," he requested. "I'm not setting foot in that place after dark." Marcus drove back to his apartment, his mind churning with questions that had no easy answers. In his living room, he pulled up Theodore's patents on his laptop, studying the technical drawings for the acoustic resonance chamber. The specifications were complex, describing a space designed to amplify and focus certain frequencies while dampening others. Theodore claimed the chamber could achieve harmonic resonance with human consciousness, whatever that meant. Research into acoustic weaponry revealed disturbing possibilities. Certain frequencies could cause nausea, disorientation, anxiety. Military research had explored sonic weapons that affected human psychology without causing physical damage. Had Theodore stumbled onto something similar, or perhaps something worse, frequencies that affected consciousness so profoundly they could cause death? The official cause of death, gas leak, suddenly seemed like a convenient fiction. What if the Whitmore family had been killed by the very chamber Theodore spent years constructing? What if his final journal entry about sealing the chamber was really an attempt to protect others from what he'd created? Marcus spent the evening diving deeper into research. Acoustic chambers, frequency, resonance, effects on human consciousness. He found studies about infrasound causing feelings of dread, about specific frequencies triggering hallucinations. One researcher described standing waves in enclosed spaces, creating zones of intense psychological effect. Was that what Theodore had built? A chamber whose acoustic properties created psychological pressure throughout the house above? The Whitmore family had lived with it for years. Maybe they'd built tolerance, or maybe they'd been slowly affected until something catastrophic happened that November morning in 1952. His phone rang, startling him from his research. Sarah Henderson, the real estate agent. Marcus, hi. I wanted to check how you're settling in. Any issues with the property? Her voice carried forced casualness that immediately raised his suspicions. It's fine. Why are you calling? I received a call today from someone asking about the estate's previous owners. Apparently, there's interest in the property's history. They mentioned you might have found something of value. Marcus's blood ran cold. He told no one except Michael. What kind of interest? Who called? They wouldn't give a name. Just said they represented a collector interested in items that might have been left on the property. Marcus, if you found anything valuable, you should know your purchase agreement includes all structures and contents. Legally, it's yours. But some people might dispute that. What people? The Whitmore family still has distant relatives. They've mostly stayed away from the estate, but if something valuable surfaced, they might make claims. After 70 years? Money motivates people. Just be careful. And if you found something significant, you might want to get legal counsel before word spreads further. After disconnecting, Marcus sat in the darkness of his apartment, feeling walls closing in. Someone knew. Whether Michael had talked despite promising secrecy, or whether information had leaked some other way, the secret was already spreading. His discovery, less than 24 hours old, was becoming public knowledge. He needed to act fast, document everything, verify ownership, establish legal protection before claims materialized. But more immediately, he needed to secure the chamber. If word got out about $400 million in vintage cars sitting in an unsealed underground vault, he'd have thieves descending before lawyers could file their first brief. Marcus grabbed his keys and headed for the door. Despite the late hour, despite Michael's warning about visiting after dark, he needed to secure the collection. The drive to Whitmore Estate passed in a blur of anxiety and planning. He'd need to change the locks, install security systems, maybe hire guards. The cost would be substantial, but necessary. The mansion loomed against the night sky, darker than the darkness around it. Marcus had left lights on in the foyer, but they did little to diminish the building's oppressive presence. He parked close to the front door and gathered his supplies. New padlocks, chains, his toolbox. Rudimentary security, but better than leaving everything exposed. The foyer's emptiness felt different at night. Shadows gathered in corners despite the overhead lighting. The chandelier, which had seemed welcoming in daylight, now cast strange patterns across the marble floor. Marcus moved quickly through to the kitchen and the basement door. Descending into darkness activated primitive fears he'd successfully suppressed during daylight visits. His footsteps echoed wrong, creating strange harmonics in the basement's vastness. The flashlight beam seemed weaker, pushing back the darkness with less confidence. By the time he reached the ancient wooden door, his heart was racing. The passage beyond was worse. The carved stone walls seemed to press inward, and his light revealed details he hadn't noticed before. Symbols scratched into the rock, too regular to be natural but too worn to decipher. Had Theodore carved these, or had the original excavators left marks? At the steel door, Marcus paused. He'd left it open, wedged with a piece of wood to ensure easy access. Now the wedge was gone. The door was closed. Not locked, but closed. Had it swung shut on its own, or had someone else been here? Marcus's hand trembled as he gripped the wheel mechanism. Every instinct screamed to retreat, to leave this place and never return. But $400 million sat beyond this door. His discovery, his responsibility. He turned the wheel and pulled. The chamber was dark. His lights should have activated automatically when the door opened, but they remained off. Marcus swept his flashlight across the space, finding the rows of vehicles exactly as he'd left them. Everything appeared untouched, yet something felt wrong. The air was different, heavier, carrying a charge like before a thunderstorm. He moved toward the electrical panel he'd seen earlier, intending to check the lighting system. His footsteps echoed strangely, the sound bouncing back with odd distortions. Not echoes exactly, but reflections that arrived at wrong intervals, suggesting the space's dimensions had somehow changed. Impossible. The chamber couldn't change. Yet his flashlight revealed distances that didn't match his memory. The far wall seemed farther away, the ceiling higher, the spaces between vehicles wider, all subtle differences that shouldn't exist, but undeniably did. Marcus reached the electrical panel and found the main breaker thrown. Someone had deliberately shut off power to the chamber. He flipped the breaker, and lights flickered to life overhead. The sudden illumination should have been reassuring. Instead, it revealed something that made his breath catch. The cars had moved, not dramatically, not in ways anyone else might notice, but Marcus had photographed everything. He knew exactly where each vehicle had been positioned. Now they sat at different angles, shifted by inches or feet. 47 vehicles, each moved slightly from its original position. His mind raced through explanations. Ground settling, temperature changes causing expansion. But these cars weighed thousands of pounds each. They didn't shift randomly. Someone had moved them. But who? And why such small adjustments? Marcus walked between the rows, noting each variance. The pattern made no sense. Some cars had been angled toward the chamber's center, others pushed slightly back. No consistency, no apparent purpose, unless the purpose wasn't the final positions but the act of moving them. A message, perhaps, a warning that said, "I was here. I know what you found. I can access this space whenever I want." At Theodore's desk, Marcus found another change. The journals had been rearranged. He'd left them in chronological order, but now they were stacked differently, and on top, open to a specific page, was the final journal. The entry from the 4th of November, 1952. But when Marcus looked at the page, he saw additional writing. Words that hadn't been there this morning. Fresh ink, still slightly wet, in handwriting that matched Theodore's distinctive style. His rational mind rejected the impossibility, even as his eyes confirmed it. The new entry read, "You are not ready. The collection tests all who find it. Most fail quickly, fleeing the pressure they cannot understand. But you have stayed. That shows strength or foolishness. Time will reveal which. The chamber offers clarity but demands tribute. Understanding comes with cost. Do you accept?" Marcus stumbled backward, the journal falling from his nerveless fingers. This was impossible. Theodore had been dead for 70 years. His last entry was dated the day before his death. No one could add to these journals. No one could replicate that distinctive handwriting. Yet fresh ink stared up at him from the page. A sound echoed through the chamber. Not mechanical, not structural. A low-frequency vibration that Marcus felt more than heard. It started at the edge of perception and gradually intensified, resonating through his chest, his bones, his skull. The acoustic properties Theodore had documented. The chamber was activating. Marcus ran for the exit. The vibration increased, making his vision blur and his balance uncertain. The distances seemed to stretch impossibly, the door moving farther away with each step. He knew this was perception distortion, the chamber's acoustic properties affecting his consciousness, but knowing didn't diminish the effect. He finally reached the steel door and stumbled through. The vibration cut off instantly, as if a switch had been thrown. Behind him, the chamber sat silent and still, lit by overhead lights that revealed nothing unusual, just rows of vintage cars in perfect preservation. Marcus slammed the door shut and spun the wheel, locking it. His hands shook as he worked. His breath came in gasps. Every nerve screamed to keep running, to put distance between himself and whatever Theodore had built down here. He made it back to the basement, then the kitchen, then the foyer. Only when he stood outside with the night air cooling his sweat-drenched skin did his panic begin to subside. He leaned against his truck, forcing slow breaths, trying to process what had just happened. The rational explanation was simple. He'd experienced a panic attack triggered by stress and darkness. The chamber's acoustic properties had affected his perception. The moved cars and new journal entry were misremembered details, his mind playing tricks under pressure. Everything had a logical explanation, except he didn't believe that. Something impossible had happened in that chamber. Theodore Whitmore's presence lingered there, his consciousness somehow embedded in the acoustic resonance he'd spent years perfecting. The collection didn't just test those who found it, it communicated with them. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Theodore's chamber shows the truth to those brave enough to look. But truth has a cost. Are you willing to pay? Another message followed immediately. The collection must remain together. Disperse it and you disperse him. Keep it intact and he persists. Your choice determines everything. Marcus deleted both messages with shaking fingers. But they'd confirmed his suspicion. Whatever Theodore had built wasn't just an acoustic chamber. It was something far stranger, a mechanism for preserving not just cars, but consciousness itself. Theodore hadn't died in 1952. He'd transformed, embedding himself in the resonant frequencies of the space he'd created. And now, Marcus, by discovering the collection, had become entangled in whatever Theodore had become. The house that pushed people away, the chamber that tested visitors, the collection that couldn't be separated. All of it was Theodore, still exerting control from beyond death through acoustic properties that made consciousness persistent. Marcus drove back to his apartment in a daze. He should call someone. Michael, Sarah, the police. But what would he say? That a dead man was communicating through vibrations and mysterious text messages? That 400 million in vintage cars came with a ghost? They'd think he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. Maybe the chamber's acoustic properties had affected him more profoundly than he realized. Maybe none of this was real, but the cars were real. The collection existed. And whether Theodore's presence was genuine or a psychological effect of the space he'd built, the result was the same. Marcus couldn't simply take the money and walk away. Not anymore. He spent the night researching acoustic consciousness transfer, fringe theories about preserving personality and standing wave patterns, experiments with infrasound and human psychology. Most of it was pseudoscience, speculation built on minimal evidence. But some researchers suggested consciousness wasn't purely biological. That information could persist in environmental patterns. That spaces could encode memory and intention through physical resonance. Theodore had been a genius inventor. If anyone could have built a mechanism for consciousness persistence, it would be him. The question wasn't whether it was possible. The question was what Marcus would do now that he'd discovered it. By dawn, he'd made his decision. He would honor Theodore's wishes, but on his own terms. The collection would stay together, preserved as intended, but it wouldn't remain hidden. Marcus would create a museum, carefully controlled and curated. Visitors would experience Theodore's achievement without knowing the full truth about what lay beneath the mansion. And Marcus would be its guardian, not because Theodore demanded it, but because having found this incredible secret, walking away was impossible. The collection had chosen him, or he'd chosen it. Perhaps in the end, the distinction didn't matter. He called Michael, waking his friend with the early hour. "I need your help turning the estate into a museum. Professional quality, world-class security, climate control that can't fail. Whatever it costs, it needs to be done right." Michael's sleep-roughened voice carried confusion. "What happened? Last night you were still deciding." "Last night I learned the collection can't be separated. I can't sell it, so I'm keeping it. All of it. And I need to do it properly." "Marcus, are you okay? You sound weird." "I'm fine. Better than fine. I know what I have to do now. Will you help?" A long pause. Then, Yeah, I'll help. But Marcus, we're talking about serious money to do this right. 6 figures minimum, maybe 7. You ready for that commitment? I've got 400 million in cars sitting under my house. I think I can afford proper security. He disconnected before Michael could ask more questions. There was too much to do, too many details to arrange. Legal consultation about ownership, insurance evaluation, security system design, structural assessment of the chamber to ensure it could support controlled access. All of it would take months, maybe years. But Marcus had time, and now he had purpose. He discovered Theodore Whitmore's final legacy. Not just valuable cars, but a testament to obsession and preservation. A collection that represented the pinnacle of automotive achievement, hidden beneath a house that protected its secret for 70 years. The Whitmore estate had tested him. The chamber had showed him truths he wasn't sure he was ready to accept. But he hadn't fled like the others. He'd stayed. He'd pushed through the fear and strangeness to claim what had been waiting for someone brave enough or foolish enough to find it. Now the real work began, transforming a hidden obsession into a curated experience, preserving Theodore's achievement while making it accessible to those who'd appreciate it, guarding $400 million in automotive history while honoring the wishes of a dead man who might not be entirely dead. Marcus stood at his apartment window, watching sunrise paint the sky. Somewhere 12 miles away, the Whitmore estate sat silent on its hilltop. Beneath it, in a chamber whose acoustic properties defied simple explanation, 47 perfect vehicles waited in darkness. And somewhere in those resonant frequencies, Theodore Whitmore persisted, watching his guardian begin the next chapter of the collection's strange story. This was Marcus's life now, not the renovation project he'd planned, not the YouTube series he'd envisioned. Something stranger and more significant. He'd become the guardian of Theodore Whitmore's impossible legacy, the keeper of secrets that blurred the line between consciousness and acoustics, the curator of $400 million in cars that came with one very unusual condition: their collector was still watching. The transformation of the Whitmore estate began 3 days after Marcus's decision. Michael arrived with a crew of carefully selected contractors, men who asked few questions and focused on the work rather than the property's reputation. Marcus had been strategic in his hiring, offering premium wages and emphasizing the prestige of working on what would become a world-class automotive museum. "We start with security," Michael announced, surveying the property with professional assessment, perimeter fencing, cameras, motion sensors. Then we secure the chamber itself. Reinforced doors, climate control, fire suppression. This place needs to be Fort Knox. Marcus nodded, watching the crew unload equipment. He'd spent the previous days consulting with lawyers who'd verified his ownership of the collection. Theodore's purchases had been legitimate, documented with bills of sale and transfer papers meticulously preserved in his journals. A few vehicles had murky provenance, but nothing that would trigger legal challenges. The collection was legally Marcus's, worth conservatively $420 million. The insurance evaluation had been more challenging. Companies balked at the collection's value, demanding independent appraisal before considering coverage. Marcus had arranged for 3 different automotive experts to visit the chamber, swearing each to confidentiality agreements backed by substantial penalties. Their reactions had been uniformly stunning: disbelief, followed by careful examination, followed by confirmation that yes, this was real, this was unprecedented, this changed automotive history. The appraised value came back at $463 million. Several vehicles were worth more than initially estimated, particularly the Bugatti Royale prototype, which one expert valued at $130 million alone. Marcus had been sitting in his apartment when the final appraisal arrived via encrypted email. The number on the screen had seemed abstract, too large to connect to physical reality. But the reality sat beneath his property, waiting for him to fulfill his promise to Theodore. The collection would be preserved intact. The museum would showcase automotive excellence while protecting the secret of what Theodore had truly built in that chamber. Construction proceeded rapidly over the following weeks. Michael's crew proved efficient and professional, treating the estate with respect rather than the nervous fear previous contractors had shown. Marcus wondered if Theodore's influence had diminished, or if the chamber's effects only manifested to those who descended alone into its depths. He'd avoided returning to the chamber since the night of the impossible journal entry and moved cars. Part of him wanted to dismiss the experience as stress-induced hallucination, but the text messages on his phone remained concrete evidence that something inexplicable was happening. He'd saved them, documenting what he couldn't explain but couldn't ignore. Sarah Henderson called weekly, her questions growing more pointed. "There are rumors circulating about your discovery, collectors asking questions. You should know interest is building." "Let it build," Marcus replied. "The museum will open when it's ready, not before. And when will that be? 6 months, maybe a year. These things can't be rushed." In reality, Marcus knew the timeline was flexible. He could open tomorrow if he chose, simply unlocking the chamber and charging admission. But Theodore's presence demanded something more thoughtful. A proper museum required careful curation, educational context, and controlled access that would honor the collection's significance. Michael approached him one afternoon while overseeing installation of the security system's main hub. "We need to talk about the chamber access. Right now, anyone can walk down there if they get past the basement. We need to control entry more carefully." "I've been thinking about that," Marcus acknowledged. "What if we create a dedicated entrance, a separate structure that leads directly to the chamber, bypassing the house entirely?" Michael considered. "An elevator shaft with controlled access? Museum entrance at ground level descends directly to the chamber. Visitors never enter the main house. That could work. They spent the next hour sketching possibilities. The solution that emerged was elegant, a modern glass pavilion built 50 yards from the mansion, housing ticket office, gift shop, and an elevator that would descend 60 feet to chamber level. A tunnel would connect the elevator to the chamber's steel door, allowing controlled visitor flow without exposing Theodore's original passage or the mansion's basement. It'll cost serious money, Michael warned. Excavation, structural engineering, the elevator alone will be 6 figures. Do it, Marcus decided. This museum needs to be world-class. Cost isn't the primary concern. As construction expanded to include the pavilion, Marcus finally forced himself to return to the chamber. He needed measurements for the tunnel connection, and he needed to confront whatever presence lingered in that space. Avoiding it indefinitely wasn't sustainable if he intended to live on this property as its guardian. He descended at noon on a Tuesday, with Michael's crew working above and sunlight streaming through the mansion's windows. The psychological comfort of knowing others were nearby gave him courage as he navigated the passage and reached the steel door. The wheel turned smoothly, the door opened, and beyond, the chamber sat exactly as he'd left it. Lights activated automatically. The cars remained in their slightly adjusted positions. Nothing had moved further. Nothing felt threatening or strange. Marcus stepped inside, his footsteps echoing naturally with none of the distorted acoustics from his previous visit. He moved between the vehicles, taking measurements and noting details for the tunnel entrance. The work occupied his attention, grounding him in practical concerns rather than supernatural speculation. At Theodore's desk, he paused. The journals sat in their altered arrangement. The final volume remained open to November 4th, showing Theodore's original entry and the impossible addition that had appeared in fresh ink. But examining it now in daylight, Marcus noticed something he'd missed in his panic. The new writing wasn't perfectly fresh. It showed slight aging, a subtle patina that suggested weeks or months had passed since the ink dried. Had the writing been there all along? Had Marcus simply missed it during his first examination, then noticed it later and assumed it was new? The alternative that Theodore's consciousness could physically write in his journals seemed impossible, but misremembering seemed almost as unlikely. Marcus's memory was generally reliable, particularly for details he documented photographically. He took photos of the journal pages now, creating undeniable records. Whatever happened going forward, he'd have proof of the journal's exact state at this moment. If new entries appeared, he'd know with certainty rather than relying on potentially flawed memory. As he worked, Marcus became aware of the chamber's acoustic properties Theodore had documented. The space did sound different. His movements created odd harmonics, and certain frequencies seemed to amplify while others disappeared entirely. It wasn't threatening exactly, just unusual, like standing in a concert hall designed for very specific sound qualities. He recorded audio samples, thinking later analysis might reveal patterns. If Theodore had discovered frequencies that affected consciousness, maybe modern equipment could detect and measure them. Understanding the chamber's properties scientifically might demystify what had seemed supernatural. Hours passed as Marcus documented everything methodically. By the time he emerged, afternoon had stretched toward evening. Michael found him in the kitchen, looking exhausted but satisfied. "Get what you needed?" Michael asked. "More than I needed. Measurements, photos, audio recordings. I want to understand exactly what Theodore built down there." "Still think it's more than just a storage chamber?" Marcus hesitated. "I think Theodore was brilliant enough to create something we don't fully understand yet. But whether that's consciousness transfer or just really effective acoustic design, I can't say." Michael accepted the non-answer. "Well, the crew's made good progress. Want to see the pavilion site?" They walked across the grounds to where excavation had begun for the separate entrance structure. The hole was substantial, descending 20 feet already with another 40 to go before reaching chamber level. Engineers had verified the soil stability and designed reinforcements to ensure the mansion's foundation wouldn't be affected. "This'll change the property's whole character," Michael observed. "Right now, it's a creepy old mansion on a hill. Once the pavilion's built and the museum opens, it becomes a destination. Tours, visitors, revenue. You ready for that?" "I have to be." This collection deserves to be seen by people who'll appreciate it. Keeping it hidden forever would dishonor Theodore's achievement. Even though he's the one who hid it, he hid it until someone worthy found it. I found it. Now I have to share it responsibly. Construction accelerated through the autumn months. The pavilion took shape, its modern glass and steel design contrasting deliberately with the Gothic mansion. Marcus wanted visitors to understand they were transitioning between eras, from Theodore's 19th century world to a contemporary presentation of his achievement. The elevator installation was complex, requiring precision engineering to ensure smooth descent to chamber level. The tunnel connection posed its own challenges, needing to intersect the chamber's existing structure without compromising its unique acoustic properties. Engineers consulted extensively with acoustics experts, designing an entrance that would maintain the chamber's sound characteristics while allowing controlled access. During this period, Marcus established relationships with automotive museums and collector organizations. He announced his intention to open the Whitmore Automotive Museum the following spring, offering limited previews to industry experts and potential sponsors. The response was overwhelming. Every major automotive publication wanted exclusive coverage. Collectors offered millions for private viewings. Sponsors competed to associate their brands with the discovery. Marcus carefully managed the attention, granting select interviews while maintaining control of the narrative. He emphasized Theodore's genius and dedication, presenting the collection as a monument to automotive excellence rather than a financial windfall. The story resonated. Reclusive industrialist spends lifetime assembling perfect collection, hides it for worthy discoverer. Legacy finally revealed after 70 years. What Marcus didn't mention was the chamber's unusual properties, the impossible journal entries, or his growing conviction that Theodore's presence somehow persisted in the space he'd created. Those details remained private, shared only with Michael, and even then, incompletely. As winter approached, the construction reached a critical milestone. The elevator was functional, the tunnel complete, the chamber entrance ready for finishing touches. Marcus arranged a private test of the full visitor experience, inviting Michael and 2 automotive historians to be the museum's first unofficial guests. They gathered at the pavilion on a cold December morning. Marcus had prepared carefully, creating interpretive materials that would guide visitors through the collection while explaining Theodore's vision. The historians, both men in their 60s who'd spent careers studying automotive design, approached with professional skepticism that barely concealed their excitement. If even half the rumors are true, one historian named Robert said, "This will be the most significant automotive discovery in 50 years. Judge for yourself," Marcus replied, gesturing toward the Mercus. Elevator. Everything you've heard is real. The descent took 45 seconds. The elevator moving smoothly through bedrock, while gentle lighting illuminated glass panels, showing the geological strata they passed. Marcus had designed this as part of the experience, helping visitors understand they were traveling to a space deliberately separated from the world above. The tunnel emerged into the chamber through a doorway that Marcus had positioned to maximize impact. Visitors would step through and immediately face the Bugatti Royale at the collection's center, with other vehicles arranged in carefully planned sightlines that drew the eye through automotive history. Robert and his colleague James stopped dead upon entering. Their professional composure cracked immediately, replaced by childlike wonder. "My God," Robert whispered. "That's the 7th Royale, the lost prototype. It actually exists." They moved through the collection like pilgrims in a cathedral, stopping at each vehicle with reverence. Marcus watched them work, noting what captured attention and what needed better interpretation. Michael documented their reactions on video, footage that would be invaluable for planning the public opening. As the historians examined the cars, Marcus became aware of the chamber's acoustic properties activating. Not dramatically, not threatening, but present. A subtle resonance that made voices sound richer and footsteps echo with unusual clarity. The historians noticed, commenting on the space's remarkable acoustics. "It's like a concert hall," James observed, "but designed for machines rather than music." Theodore called it an acoustic resonance chamber, Marcus explained. He documented specific frequency properties that he believed created perfect preservation conditions. Clearly, he succeeded. "These vehicles look like they rolled off the line yesterday." The tour lasted 3 hours, with the historians requesting detailed examinations of specific cars. Marcus had prepared documentation for each vehicle: Theodore's original purchase records, technical specifications, historical significance. The historians absorbed everything, occasionally breaking into technical discussions that demonstrated their deep expertise. As they prepared to leave, Robert turned to Marcus with unusual intensity. "You understand what you have here, don't you? This isn't just valuable cars. This is a time capsule, a window into Theodore Whitmore's mind and his era's peak achievements. The museum you're creating will be genuinely important. That's my intention. But you need to be careful. Once word spreads fully, you'll face incredible pressure. Collectors will want to buy individual vehicles. Museums will demand loans. Every automotive enthusiast in the world will want access. You need ironclad policies before you open." Marcus nodded. "I'm working with lawyers on that now. The collection stays intact. No sales, no loans that separate vehicles. Limited access controlled by reservation. This isn't a commercial venture. It's a preservation project." "Good, because Theodore clearly intended this collection to remain whole. Breaking it up would betray that vision." They ascended together, emerging into winter sunlight that seemed harsh after the chamber's controlled environment. The historians immediately began discussing how they'd describe the experience in their publications, their excitement evident in rapid-fire planning. After they left, Michael turned to Marcus. "That went well. They're going to write about this, and when they do, you'll have thousands of people wanting to visit." "I know. Which means we need to finalize everything before spring. Ticketing system, security protocols, visitor guidelines. Once we open, there's no going back." The winter months passed in intensive preparation. Marcus hired staff, security personnel, tour guides, administrative support. He established a foundation to manage the museum, ensuring its operation would continue beyond his personal involvement. Legal documents cemented the collection's integrity, preventing future sales or dispersal. He also continued his private investigation into Theodore's chamber. The audio recordings he'd made revealed unusual frequency patterns, standing waves that shouldn't exist in a space that size. Acoustic engineers consulted remotely confirmed the chamber's design was extraordinary, though none could explain exactly how Theodore had achieved such precise control over sound behavior. The journal entries remained unchanged. Marcus checked weekly, documenting each visit photographically. Whatever he'd experienced that first night, whether hallucination or genuine supernatural contact, hadn't repeated. The chamber felt increasingly normal, just an unusual space with interesting acoustic properties. Yet Marcus couldn't shake the conviction that Theodore's presence lingered, not as a ghost exactly, but as an imprint. The space Theodore had obsessed over for decades seemed to remember him, to carry his intentions even without conscious direction. Whether that was metaphor or something more literal, Marcus had stopped trying to determine. In March, Marcus received unexpected contact. An email from an attorney representing distant Whitmore relatives, specifically Theodore's great-great-niece named Patricia. She'd learned about the museum and wanted to visit before the public opening. The email was polite but firm, suggesting family members had certain moral rights regarding Theodore's legacy. Marcus consulted his lawyers, who confirmed Patricia had no legal claim to the collection or property. Everything had transferred properly through estate sales over the decades. But they advised meeting with her, both as courtesy and to prevent future challenges. Patricia Whitmore arrived on a rainy April morning, 2 weeks before the museum's scheduled opening. She was in her late 40s, a professor of art history at a Boston university, with Theodore's distinctive features softened by generations. Marcus met her at the pavilion, uncertain what to expect. "Thank you for seeing me," Patricia began. "I know you have no legal obligation, but Theodore was family, and learning about this collection, his life's work hidden all these years, I felt I needed to see it." "I understand. Would you like a tour?" They descended together, Marcus watching Patricia's reaction as the chamber revealed itself. Unlike the historian's professional excitement, Patricia's response was deeply emotional. Tears formed as she moved between the vehicles, touching chrome surfaces with reverent fingers. "He was considered eccentric," she said quietly. The family rarely spoke about him, just vague mentions of a relative who'd made and lost a fortune on strange obsessions. I never knew the specifics until your museum announcement. Theodore was a genius, Marcus offered. What he built here is extraordinary. Patricia stopped at Theodore's desk, examining the journals. May I read these? Of course. They're part of the collection's historical record. She spent an hour with the journals, absorbing Theodore's thoughts across decades. When she finally looked up, her expression had transformed from grief to understanding. He wasn't crazy, he was purposeful. This collection wasn't obsession, it was mission. That's how I see it, Marcus agreed. Theodore believed these vehicles represented achievement worth preserving. He dedicated his life to that preservation. The family story said he killed them, Patricia revealed quietly. Great-grandfather, great-grandmother, their children. The official cause was gas leak, but family whispers claimed Theodore did something, that his experiments or obsessions went wrong and everyone died because of him. Marcus felt ice in his stomach. What kind of experiments? No one knew specifics, just that Theodore was working on something in his final years, something he'd built beneath the house. The family always believed the official story was a cover-up, that whatever Theodore created had killed them all. She gestured around the chamber. But seeing this, reading his journals, I understand now. He didn't kill them. He transformed himself and offered them the same transformation. And maybe some accepted while others didn't, or maybe the process failed. But it wasn't murder, it was transcendence attempt. Marcus stared at her. Transcendence into what? Into this. Patricia spread her arms, encompassing the chamber. Into resonance patterns that preserve consciousness. Theodore didn't want to die. He wanted to persist with his collection. And I think he succeeded. The confirmation of Marcus's private suspicions by someone who'd never experienced the chamber's strangeness was both validating and terrifying. You felt it too? His presence? From the moment we descended, the acoustics aren't just unusual, they're alive. Theodore embedded himself in the frequencies he created, not as a ghost, but as persistent information, like music recorded on vinyl, except the recording is consciousness itself. They sat together at Theodore's desk, two people separated by family connection, but united by shared understanding of what Theodore had achieved. Patricia explained what she knew of his final years, increasing isolation, obsessive focus on acoustic research, and family members who grew concerned but couldn't intervene. The night they died, Theodore had invited everyone to the chamber. He'd finished his work and wanted to share it. The family story says they gathered for dinner, then everyone went to the basement together. Servants found them the next morning, all dead with no marks or apparent cause. Theodore was at his desk down here, journals open, as if he'd simply stopped existing. What if they didn't die? Marcus asked slowly. What if Theodore succeeded, and what killed their bodies was consciousness transferring into acoustic patterns? Patricia nodded. That's my theory, but it failed for everyone except Theodore. He was the only one strong enough, or obsessed enough, or brilliant enough to complete the transformation. The others died trying. The implications were staggering. Theodore hadn't just built a chamber with unusual properties. He'd created a mechanism for consciousness persistence, tested it on himself and his family, and succeeded only in his own transcendence. His family had died in the attempt, which explained why the official story emphasized tragedy over triumph. Does this change your plans? Patricia asked. Knowing what Theodore actually built here? Marcus considered. No, the museum opens as planned. The collection gets preserved and shared, but maybe we don't share everything. Theodore's transformation remains private, our secret. Agreed. Some truths are too strange for public consumption. Let people marvel at the cars and Theodore's dedication. We'll know there's more to the story. They emerged from the chamber together, having formed an unexpected alliance. Patricia agreed to serve on the museum's advisory board, lending family legitimacy while protecting Theodore's secrets. In exchange, Marcus would ensure the collection remained intact and Theodore's legacy honored. The museum opened 2 weeks later to carefully controlled fanfare. Marcus had limited first-month access to automotive industry professionals, major donors, and carefully selected journalists. Response was overwhelming. Every publication from specialist magazines to mainstream newspapers covered the discovery. calling it the most significant automotive find in history. Visitors moved through the experience Marcus had designed: pavilion entrance with historical context, elevator descent with geological education, tunnel transition, and chamber revelation. Every element guided them toward appreciation of both the vehicles and Theodore's achievement. The chamber's acoustic properties enhanced the experience without overwhelming it. Visitors commented on the unusual sound quality, but attributed it to clever architectural design rather than anything supernatural. Only Marcus and Patricia, watching from the security office monitors, understood the fuller truth. Revenue from the museum exceeded projections immediately. At $1,000 per ticket with limited daily access, the museum could operate sustainably while maintaining exclusivity. Marcus reinvested profits into preservation, establishing endowments that would ensure the collection's care for generations. Michael continued as general contractor, now focused on mansion renovation that would eventually include additional exhibition space and research facilities. The main house, no longer feeling oppressive with the chamber's activity channeled through controlled visitor access, became a workable space. Marcus moved into the third floor, claiming Theodore's original living quarters as his own residence. Living above the collection felt appropriate. He was its guardian, Theodore's chosen successor, even if that choosing had happened through acoustic consciousness rather than legal documents. Every evening, after the final visitors departed and staff locked up, Marcus would descend alone to the chamber and spend time among the vehicles. Theodore had loved enough to tie his consciousness to their preservation. Sometimes, in the chamber's resonant silence, Marcus felt Theodore's presence strongly, not threatening or demanding, but companionable. Two guardians separated by 70 years, but united in dedication to automotive excellence. Marcus would update Theodore's journals with contemporary entries, documenting the museum's progress and his own thoughts about the responsibility he'd inherited. He never saw new writing appear, never experienced the moved cars or impossible phenomena from his first night. Perhaps Theodore's consciousness had quieted, satisfied that his legacy was secure, or perhaps the initial manifestations had been Theodore testing his new guardian, ensuring Marcus was worthy of the trust. Either way, Marcus had made peace with the strangeness. He discovered $463 million in vintage automobiles, but more importantly, he discovered purpose. The restoration YouTube channel he'd planned seemed trivial compared to preserving and sharing Theodore Whitmore's extraordinary achievement. A year after opening, the museum had become an international destination. Automotive enthusiasts from 6 continents visited, many making multiple trips to fully absorb the collection's magnificence. Educational programs brought students to study engineering and design. Research fellows examined Theodore's patents and journals, contributing to acoustic understanding. Through it all, Marcus maintained the core promise: the collection would never be dispersed. Offers to purchase individual vehicles arrived regularly, sometimes exceeding $100 million for the Bugatti Royale. Marcus refused every offer, explaining that Theodore's vision required the collection remain intact. On November 5th, the anniversary of Theodore's death, Marcus held a private ceremony in the chamber. Patricia attended, along with Michael and key museum staff. They stood among the vehicles and honored Theodore's memory, acknowledging both his genius and the cost of his final transformation. As they observed a moment of silence, the chamber's acoustics shifted subtly. Nothing dramatic, just a harmonic change that seemed to acknowledge their presence. Marcus smiled, recognizing Theodore's response. The consciousness embedded in frequency patterns was still there, still aware, still connected to the space it had chosen as eternal residence. After everyone departed, Marcus remained alone in the chamber. He sat at Theodore's desk and opened the final journal to its last entry from November 4th, 1952. Beneath Theodore's original words and the mysterious addition, from Marcus's first night, he added his own entry. Year 1 complete. The museum thrives. Your collection is protected and shared with those who appreciate it. The chamber maintains its properties, and I maintain my guardianship. We're partners in this, Theodore. You built something impossible, and I'm honored to preserve it. Thank you for waiting 70 years for the right person to find you. I hope I'm living up to your expectations. I hope you're at peace, embedded in the frequencies you created, watching your legacy flourish. He set down his pen and sat quietly, listening to the chamber's unique silence. After a moment, the lights flickered once, briefly, as if in response. Marcus nodded, accepting it as Theodore's acknowledgement. Dead or transformed, present or persistent, Theodore Whitmore remained the chamber's primary resident. Marcus was merely the guardian, the caretaker, the human face of a legacy that transcended normal existence. He stood, preparing to return to the world above. But before leaving, Marcus paused at the Bugatti Royale, running his hand along its perfect curves. "You chose well," he said quietly to Theodore's lingering presence. "These machines are worth preserving, worth dedicating a life to. I understand that now." The chamber hummed with subtle resonance, its acoustic properties carrying his words through frequencies that normal hearing couldn't detect, but consciousness somehow perceived. Theodore heard, Theodore understood, and Theodore approved. Marcus ascended to the surface, locking the chamber behind him. Above, the mansion stood solid against the evening sky, no longer threatening, but protective. The grounds that had once felt oppressive now felt purposeful. Everything Theodore had created, the house, the chamber, the collection, the acoustic persistence of his consciousness worked together toward a single goal: preservation of automotive excellence for those who'd appreciate it. And Marcus, the guardian who'd stumbled into this extraordinary responsibility, had found his life's purpose in honoring a dead man's impossible dream. Not bad for someone who just wanted to renovate a creepy mansion for YouTube content. He walked to the mansion's front entrance, Rusty waiting on the porch as he always did. Marcus had gotten the golden retriever 6 months after opening the museum, naming him after the dog in the example scripts that had somehow felt appropriate. Rusty loved the property, spending days exploring the grounds and nights curled beside Marcus's bed on the mansion's 3rd floor. Together they entered the home that had tested and chosen its guardian. Marcus had work to do tomorrow, tour schedules to review, maintenance to oversee, and new acquisitions for the museum's educational wing. Theodore's collection would always be the centerpiece, but Marcus was building around it, creating a comprehensive automotive museum that honored past achievements while celebrating ongoing innovation. The Whitmore estate had found its purpose. Theodore Whitmore had found his worthy successor, and Marcus Chen had found something worth dedicating his life to preserving. Not just cars, though they were spectacular. Not just money, though there was plenty. But legacy, the tangible proof that human genius, dedication, and obsessive pursuit of excellence could create something that transcended death itself. $463 million in vintage automobiles, an acoustic chamber that defied explanation, a consciousness embedded in standing wave patterns, and one guardian determined to honor it all, preserving Theodore's impossible achievement for generations who'd marvel at what one brilliant, obsessive man had created when he refused to let death end his life's work. That's the story of the Whitmore estate, the cursed mansion that everyone fled, the underground chamber worth hundreds of millions, and the guardian who discovered that sometimes the greatest treasures come with the strangest conditions. Marcus had accepted those conditions, and in doing so, he'd inherited not just wealth, but purpose. If you enjoyed this incredible story of discovery, legacy, and the thin line between genius and madness, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Hit that like button and check out the 2 stories on your screen right now for more unbelievable tales of hidden fortunes and impossible discoveries. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes what others call cursed is actually just waiting for someone brave enough to claim it.